There are moments when everything seems to be calm. There are no arguments, no clear signs that anything is wrong. Conversations continue to flow, routines are maintained, and on the surface, everything goes on as usual. But even so, there is something inside you that does not feel at peace. It is a kind of silent tension. It's not a concrete thought, but rather a constant background sensation, as if at any moment something could change, as if everything that is here today could disappear tomorrow without warning. This feeling manifests as a shadow walking beside you, even on the brightest days. You can be having dinner, watching a movie, or simply walking down the street, and suddenly that knot in your stomach reminds you that stability is at times very thin glass. You look at the people you love, and instead of just enjoying their presence, a part of your mind begins to calculate how much time is left, what would happen if they left, or what sign you are overlooking that indicates the beginning of the end. It is an invisible mental drain. You don't tell anyone because it sounds irrational. How are you going to explain that you are afraid of everything collapsing when, objectively, nothing is happening? However, to your nervous system, the danger is imminent. That calm feels suspicious to you. You have become so used to tranquility being the prelude to a storm that, when there are no conflicts, you feel unprotected. It is the paradox of hypervigilance. You feel safer being alert than being relaxed. And then that idea appears that seems to explain it all. I am afraid of losing them. But stop for a second. Are you sure that is the real problem? Because that fear, although it seems very clear on the surface, is often just the visible form of something much deeper. Something you don't always want to look at head on. Something that doesn't have so much to do with others, but with yourself and the narrative you have built about your own capacity for emotional survival. Think about it carefully. If it were truly just the fear of losing someone, then that fear would only appear when there are real signs that the person is pulling away. But it doesn't work like that, does it? It appears even when everything is fine. It appears without evidence. It appears in small silences, in minimal changes, in interpretations you make almost without realizing it. Has it happened to you that someone takes a little longer to reply to a message and your mind starts building catastrophic stories? Or that a simple change in the tone of voice makes you think that affection has evaporated from one second to the next? That need to analyze everything is exhausting. Your brain becomes a private detective looking for clues to a crime that has not yet been committed. You analyze the punctuation in a text, the time they spend looking at their phone, the sparkle in their eyes when they talk to you. If you don't receive the exact dose of validation you expect, the radar activates. That is not just fear of loss. That is insecurity seeking confirmation of an internal suspicion. The idea that you are not valuable enough for someone to choose to stay of their own free will. And this is where things get uncomfortable, because accepting that implies recognizing that not everything comes from the outside, that there is something inside you that was already prepared to feel that threat, even before any real change occurred. That something usually has deeper roots than you imagine. It has to do with how you learned to bond in your early years, with the experiences where you felt absence, rejection, or an instability you couldn't control, with the moments in which you understood, perhaps without words, but with great clarity, that affection could be something fragile or conditional. Imagine a child who learns that love depends on their behavior, or that important people can disappear without explanation. That child grows up but carries with them an alarm system that never fully turns off. And when you grow up with that mental structure, you begin to develop a kind of high-precision emotional radar. A radar that does not look for real connection, but looks for danger. Do you realize what that implies? That even in healthy relationships, you can be in a state of permanent alert. That even when someone is demonstrating presence to you, a part of you is already preparing for grief. It's like living with packed suitcases in a house you love, waiting at any moment to be asked to leave. You don't unpack because you believe that if you get too comfortable, the blow of reality will be much harder when the inevitable happens. You prefer to live halfway than to suffer to the maximum. And from there, from that state of survival, you begin to act. Sometimes in very subtle, almost imperceptible ways, you become more attentive than necessary. You analyze every detail to see if there is something you should correct. You try to anticipate what the other person wants or needs, becoming an expert in reading others' needs while ignoring your own. And you don't do this because it is something natural or genuine in you, but because there is a hidden intention, a rescue strategy to prevent them from leaving at all costs. Have you ever caught yourself mentally reviewing every phrase you said in a meeting, wondering if something you mentioned might have bothered someone or caused a bad impression, or feeling the urgency to fix a situation that you don't even know is broken? You apologize for insignificant things. You measure your words so as not to generate conflict. You sacrifice your own boundaries so the other person feels comfortable. That is the point where fear stops being a passing emotion and becomes your way of relating to the world. Because you are no longer sharing from who you are, but from what you believe you need to do so as not to be abandoned. You become an emotional chameleon. But the chameleon gets exhausted from constantly changing colors to fit into landscapes that do not belong to it. And that has an immense cost. A cost that isn't always noticed at first, but over time begins to erode your mental health. You get tired of thinking so much. You get tired of measuring every gesture. You get tired of feeling that your right to be loved is always at stake. Living like this is like walking on a tightrope in the middle of a storm of doubts. Any false move seems like a social death sentence. And the most ironic thing is that in that desperate attempt to maintain the bond, you begin to lose something much more important: your own authenticity. Because little by little, you stop asking yourself what you want, what you need, what makes you happy, and you start focusing solely on what you believe the other person expects so as not to disappoint them. Who are you really when you are not trying to please? That question can be much harder to answer than it seems at first glance. When your identity has been built around being the one who is always available, the one who doesn't cause problems, or the one who solves everything, the silence of not having anyone to please terrifies you. Because when you have spent a long time adapting and adjusting to external expectations, a point comes where your own identity becomes blurry, almost diffuse, and then the fear grows exponentially. It is no longer just the fear of someone leaving your life. It is the visceral fear of being left with yourself without knowing well who that person looking back at you in the mirror is. That's why the idea of losing someone hurts so much. Not just because of the person themselves, for their company or their laughter, but because of what that person represents for your internal balance. That person represents stability. They represent validation. They represent a version of you that feels sufficient, valuable, and worthy as long as that bond exists. You feel that person holds the mirror where you see yourself as someone worthwhile. If the mirror breaks or goes away, who will confirm that you are worth anything? Who will tell you that you exist? So when you imagine that disappearing, you don't just see an empty chair, you see an existential void, an abyss that terrifies you because you don't trust your own legs to keep you standing without help. But is that void real? Or is it an interpretation you have accepted as absolute truth? This is where you need to apply brutal honesty with yourself. Because many times you don't fear the loss itself, but the horror story you tell yourself about it. The story that you are going to be left alone forever, that you won't be able to manage your life, that there is something fundamentally broken in you that prevents people from staying. It is the narrative of absolute abandonment, where the departure of another becomes a definitive sentence on your lack of worth. Where does such a cruel idea come from? Who taught you that you need the gaze of another to feel complete? Maybe it wasn't a lesson someone gave you with a book. Maybe it was a silent accumulation of experiences, moments where you didn't feel seen or heard, situations where your values seemed to depend directly on your achievements or your ability to serve others. Past relationships where your place was not secure and you had to earn it every day as if it were a trophy. All of that builds a foundation of sand upon which you try to build your life. And from that foundation, it is logical that fear is your constant companion. But just because it's logical doesn't mean it's the truth. That is the distinction that can save you. Your mind may be reacting to patterns from the past, to ghosts of people who are no longer there. Even if your current reality is totally different, your brain is using old, faulty software to process a new and functional relationship. And if you don't dare to question that program, you end up living in a constant anticipation of disaster, as if the present were just a waiting room for pain, as if there were always a loose thread that someone is going to pull to undo everything you have built. Can you really enjoy a bond, a friendship, or a love if you fear it will end tomorrow all the time? The honest answer is no, you can't. There is always a reservation, an invisible wall, one eye open while the other sleeps. That tension changes the dynamic of the relationship. It makes you less present. It makes you listen less and analyze more. Instead of listening to what the person is telling you with their heart, you are listening to what you think their hidden words mean. That attitude makes you feel less and control more, and the other person perceives it even if they don't know how to name it, because there is a very clear vibrational difference between someone who shares from peace and someone who shares from panic. The former connects naturally, letting the flow of the relationship be organic. The latter tries to retain, tries to suffocate the moment so it doesn't escape. The energy of retention is heavy, it is demanding, even if it disguises itself as excessive attention or overflowing affection. And retaining has never been, nor will it ever be, the basis of a healthy and lasting relationship. Because when you try to retain, deep down you are sending a message of extreme lack. I need you to stay so that I can be okay. And that places an immense burden of responsibility on the other person, a burden of being your life support that no one should carry. It is a pressure that, sooner or later, generates a necessary distance for pure survival. Then the most painful and paradoxical part of this process occurs. The very fear that drives you to do everything humanly possible so that person doesn't leave ends up creating the exact conditions that cause the bond to fray and weaken. Your fear of loneliness pushes others toward the exit. Your need for security generates an atmosphere of suffocation. Had you ever seen it that way? It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You are so afraid they will leave you that you stop being the authentic person they fell in love with or connected with, becoming an anxious shadow that ends up causing the very withdrawal you were trying so hard to avoid. Now, understanding this doesn't mean you should transform into a cold, distant, or indifferent person. It's not about hardening your heart so as not to suffer. Authentic love always carries a dose of vulnerability, and vulnerability always implies the risk of loss. That is part of the contract of being alive. It is in reality about changing the place from which you feel, because there is an abysmal gap between loving from necessity and loving from conscious choice. When you love from necessity, everything is an emergency, everything is fragile, everything depends on external threads you don't control. You are like a shipwrecked person clinging to a piece of wood in the middle of the ocean. If the wood moves an inch, you enter a mortal panic. But when you love from choice, there is room to breathe. There is trust in the process. There is freedom. You know how to swim, so even though you prefer to be on the wood and enjoy its company, you know you won't drown if it decides to drift toward another current. And that freedom doesn't mean you don't care about the person or that the loss won't hurt. It means you have the certainty that even if the bond breaks, you will be able to hold yourself up. Do you truly trust in that capacity? Because that is where the real breaking point of this whole story lies. It's not about controlling what others do or ensuring the future is perfect. It's about developing the internal musculature necessary to know that your well-being is not a hostage to the decisions of others. That is not something built by reading a motivational phrase or overnight. It requires work deconstructing beliefs that have been installed in your mind for decades. It implies questioning yourself every time fear speaks to you. It implies observing yourself in moments of crisis without judging yourself. It implies, above all, learning to go through those discomforts that you normally avoid at all costs. Like absolute silence, like the loneliness of a Friday night, like the fact of simply being with yourself without distractions, without screens, and without noise. How long has it been since you spent quality time with yourself without trying to fill the space with something or someone? Because many times that terrible fear of losing others is directly related to the inability to inhabit your own solitude. If being alone feels like a terrifying empty desert, then losing someone feels like an emotional death sentence. But if you learn to decorate that internal space, to know yourself, to forgive yourself, and to support yourself on your worst days, the loss of others, though painful, stops being a devastating tragedy, becomes a transition of life. And that change in perspective radically transforms how you bond with others. You stop chasing shadows. You stop forcing awkward situations to get a crumb of security. You stop interpreting every little silence as a declaration of war or abandonment. You start to see people for who they really are, complex human beings with their own traumas, their own processes, their own decisions, and their own limits that have nothing to do with you. You finally understand something fundamental for peace of mind, that someone deciding to leave your life is not always a reflection of your value as a person. Sometimes paths simply fork. Sometimes people need things you can't give, or you need things they can't offer. Sometimes cycles end to make way for something new. Can you accept that without turning it into a personal attack against your essence? Because as long as you filter everything that happens outside through the thought of, what does this say about me? You are going to remain a prisoner of your own wounded ego. A cycle where any change of plans feels like a frontal rejection, where any physical or emotional distance feels like a definitive abandonment. And living like that, always on the defensive or always trying to repair what isn't broken, exhausts the soul. It exhausts you mentally because you don't allow yourself a second of real rest. It exhausts you emotionally because your stress levels are always through the roof. It keeps you in a state of alert that prevents you from savoring what you have here and now. You are so worried about tomorrow they won't be here that you completely forget that today they are here, and the present is the only territory where you can truly love. So the question from the beginning returns, but now with a depth that perhaps you couldn't see before. Do you really fear losing them? Or do you have a deep fear of what you think will happen to your identity if that happens? That distinction is what changes everything. Because if the problem resides in others, if the problem is their possible departure, then you are always going to be in a position of weakness. You are always going to be a victim of circumstances, a passive spectator of your own pain. But if the problem is your interpretation of abandonment, if the problem is how you relate to your own loneliness and your own worth, then you have a real point of action. You have power. You can question that narrative of insufficiency. You can transform it with patience and self-compassion. You can start building a relationship with yourself that is so solid, so nourishing, and so real that the presence of others is a beautiful celebration of life and not a necessity for survival. You can learn to give yourself the security, respect, and love you have sought so desperately in the hands of others. And that doesn't mean the fear will disappear by magic. Fear is an intrinsic part of our biology. There will always be a small echo of it because we value what we love, and what is valuable makes us afraid to lose it. The difference is that from now on, fear stops being the director of your orchestra. It stops defining how you speak, how you act, and how you bond. Fear goes from being the driver of the vehicle to being simply a passenger who sometimes gets noisy, but whom you no longer allow to touch the steering wheel. You start choosing people from a different place, a place of greater stability, a place that is more conscious and less reactive, a place aligned with who you truly are, not who you think you must be to be accepted. You stop asking permission to have needs. You stop apologizing for occupying space in the world. And from that authenticity, relationships transform miraculously, not because others have changed by magic, but because you are no longer projecting your void onto them. You are sharing your own presence, not your lack of it. And sharing is an act of generosity, not dependency. Sharing is being present because you wish to be, not because you feel obligated to do so to keep someone close. It is connecting deeply without losing the north of your own life. It is opening the heart wide without ceasing to be the guardian of your own well-being. So the next time you feel that old, cold fear run down your spine at a prolonged silence or an unexpected change of plans, do not react immediately. Do not run to try to fix things with an anxious message. Do not try to control the will of the other with subtle manipulations or an excess of feigned kindness. Do not look for guarantees in a world where the only constant is change. Do something radically different. Stop. Take a deep breath. Bring your attention inward toward that place where the knot feels strongest. And ask yourself with a dismantle you honesty, what am I believing about myself right now that makes this possibility of loss feel like a death threat? What part of my power have I handed over to this person without realizing it? Why have I decided that if they leave, I am left empty? There, in those uncomfortable questions, is the seed of your freedom. There is the real work you have to do, the only one that truly matters. Because at the end of the day, the problem is not that you are afraid of losing them. The real problem, the one that hurts in the depths of the soul, is that you still haven't learned to fully trust that you are not going to lose yourself no matter what happens. And that trust in your own capacity to rebuild yourself is the only thing you truly need to secure in this life. If at any moment in this video you felt that something resonated in the deepest part of you, if any part was especially uncomfortable or put into exact words a feeling you had never managed to decipher, do not ignore it. That discomfort is a sign, a compass indicating that there is something important there that deserves to be explored with calm and compassion. Do not judge yourself for feeling fear. Fear is just a part of your story seeking protection. Take the time to observe yourself in your daily life, as if you were an external observer of your own life. Notice those moments when you act moved by the panic of loss and compare them with the moments when you act from genuine choice. Learn to distinguish the voice of your wound from the voice of your essence. Question those internal stories of helplessness that you have taken as true for so long. Start writing a new narrative where you are the capable and complete protagonist. And if you feel this message has helped you see things from a different perspective, if you want to continue deepening these ideas to understand yourself better and build relationships that are not based on anxiety, but on respect and freedom, subscribe. This channel is a space designed to walk together toward greater awareness and emotional well-being. Remember that this is only the beginning of a fascinating journey toward the center of yourself, and I am here to accompany you in that process of rediscovery. Thank you for being here, for listening to yourself, and for giving yourself the opportunity to heal from the root. I'll see you in the next video.